Welcome to the Dan Norton Show. This is a special edition of the show because I have Dr. Harry Binswanger with me to discuss open immigration. Dr. Binswanger is a leading objectivist philosopher who knew Ayn Rand and was a friend of Ayn Rand in her final years. He is a PhD in philosophy from Columbia University, who's taught at Hunter College, as well as the New School for Social Research and the University of Texas at Austin. He's the author of How We Know, Epistemology on an Objectivist Foundation, the creator and compiler of the Ayn Rand Lexicon, publisher and editor of the Objectivist Forum, editor with Leonard Peikoff of audio tape workshops on objectivist epistemology, the author of Biological Basis of Teleological Concepts, a book integrating Ayn Rand and Darwin on biological goal-directedness, and for 38 years, he was a member of the board of directors of the Ayn Rand Institute. And just on a personal note, I've known Harry for decades, and I've learned a tremendous amount from him over the years, and including in a graduate seminar that I took with him on Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology. So it's a great pleasure to have you here, Harry. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I expect to enjoy it a lot.
Excellent. Okay, so our subject today is immigration, in particular open immigration. Harry has some very radical views on that subject. And to start, I think it's often good just to define our terms and say what we mean. So when you talk about immigration or open borders, what do you mean by that?
Well, much more than you think, and much less in operation. I think aside from war, if you're at war, as many countries are, and arguably we are today, but this is a temporary condition. Aside from war, there should be no sign that you've crossed the border into the U.S., other than perhaps a billboard, "Welcome to the U.S." The border does not exist to control people. It exists to control government. A nation's territory, that over which it has sovereignty, is the area that its police are limited to and where its law is enforced. So we need the Mexican police to know they can't cross over and enforce Mexican law here. And we need American police to know they can't cross over into Mexico and enforce American law in Mexico. So it's for the police and any other force wielders of the government, military for instance, to know where their jurisdiction lies, where they can enforce law and the law of their land, and where they can't. It has nothing to do with the movement of you and me and Jose and Ahmad. No, it's Ahmad. I don't know if that's a good Arab name. It has nothing to do, Muhammad. It has nothing to do with that. There's no right to interfere with the free movement of other people. And they have no right to interfere with your free movement. You should be free to take a plane to Heathrow, get off, and walk right to your hotel without being stopped by customs, without being stopped by immigration. Those people have no right to interfere with you when you go somewhere. And our government has no right to interfere with the movement of people into our country and out of our country. And then you want to know what kind of controls would there be? The same controls there are over you. Do you think the police have the right to stop you when you're going into the grocery and say, "Papers? Show me your papers. What permission do you have to be here?" Can the police say, "Well, you've got white hair And there's a lot of people with white hair, I say that because I have white hair, have committed petty theft. So we're going to ask you to step in here and prove you haven't committed any petty thefts. You can't do that. And you can't check the criminal record. You can't detain a person coming across the border to check his criminal record, which probably wouldn't be very informational anyway, because, well, I'll get to that. Crime is a topic that we'll get to. So, welcome to America is the only border control, which is not a control, it's a welcome, that there should be. And this is radical, but radical means fundamental. The fundamental I'm getting to is no man has the right to initiate physical force against another. 2, government has no powers, no just authorized powers except what the individual has and delegates to the government. You can't stop someone at the border and say, hey, you're coming into the area where I live, not my property, but you're coming on a road that is in my town, so I get to hold a gun to your head and demand that you prove to me you're not a criminal, or whatever it is that you want him to prove to you. You have no right to do that. 300 million of us have no right to do that, so we can't delegate that right to the government. Government has no just power to interfere with anyone without probable cause. So my principle is whatever they can do to you when you walk into your neighborhood grocery store, and whatever they can't do to you, is the same standard at the border, which should not even be noticed by people moving across it. So if you walk into a grocery store and you got a pistol held like this, yeah, the police have a right and a duty to stop you and remove that pistol and so forth. And if somebody's crossing the border with a pistol, it's exactly the same. But if you go across this street and are just normal looking and normal acting, the government has no right to stop you and make you prove a negative. Prove you're not a criminal. Prove you're not carrying an infectious disease. And by the same token, the government can't do that to any foreign person at the border. It makes no difference. This line between the U.S. and Mexico makes no difference to the rights of people. You can't initiate, and the government can't initiate, physical force against another person without grounds about him. He's doing something funny? Okay, yeah. You can stop him in Dubuque, and you can stop him in El Paso or the border with Mexicali with California. But without probable cause or reasonable suspicion, the police no one can interfere with the free movement of individuals. So that's what I'm advocating. I'm advocating full freedom. Freedom of movement as well as every other kind of freedom. And freedom means the right to take the actions required to sustain your life by your own judgment. And the proviso is as long as you do not use force on other people, as long as you respect their rights. But the people crossing the border are not violating any rights. Now, I should take a breath here to let you say something, Dan.
Okay. So one thing that I think some people might be concerned about, even people within objectivism, and I think there are differences among objectivists on the topic of immigration, is shouldn't there be at least some kind of minimal screening at the border in order to screen out people associated with drug cartels who are very violent? There's lots of murders committed in Mexico just across the border. There's jihadists around the world who might want to come commit some kind of terrorist attack. And I think a lot of objectivists would say, yeah, I'm on board with a much freer system than we have today. Like, we shouldn't have quotas. It shouldn't take a years-long process and thousands of dollars to hire immigration attorneys to get in. But
No,
shouldn't we
that's a
have at
10-year.
least like
It's a 10-year process,
okay, 10-year,
and it's up to around $100,000, I believe, to pay just to go through all the hoops, and they say, well, get in line for legal immigration. Yeah, that's a 10-year line with 100,000, certainly 50,000 in legal fees, and all kinds of restrictions at the end of it. So it's not just a matter of like getting into a movie theater when you get to the back of the line.
yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of disagreement. Where do they get off is what you want to ask.
So
Or where
people,
do
I
I
think,
get
are
off?
they're generally sympathetic to the idea of freer immigration, but shouldn't there be at least a minimal amount, like 5-minute interrogation or interview at the border?
Yeah. If you think there should be at the grocery, and when you get on a bus, and when you walk down the street to go to the downtown from Midtown. My God, if you're coming from Midtown, who knows what kind of criminals there are in Midtown, and you're trying to get into downtown? So we have to have some kind of, I'm in principle, this is what they're saying, principle in favor of free movement, but there's a lot of crime. So if you're coming down from a minority neighborhood, we know there's a lot of crime up there, you've got to be searched and frisked, and you've got to answer, fill out some forms and show that you have a right to be outside of your ghetto. Then it would be a ghetto. So there's just, foreigners happen to be of the same species as you and I. Foreigners are human beings, and we have our rights as human beings. So the epistemological, separate the political or the metaphysical from the epistemological. The metaphysical point that all objectivists should agree upon is that peaceful, regular folks like you and I should be able to come, I should say you and me, should be able to just come in because we're not doing anything bad. There's no reason to think we'll ever do anything bad. And by bad, I mean rights violating. So the metaphysical principle is that the innocent, the self-supporting, the good people get to come in. Then the epistemological issue is, what do you have the right to do to people to find out if they're good or bad? If they're peaceful or violent, if they're rights respecting or rights violating. What do you have? And we have centuries of law that has evolved in a constitution and a whole legal system that's devoted to answering that question and saying specifically, what is enough evidence to constitute an objective threat or even reasonable suspicion? I'm just saying apply those same epistemological standards to determine who is stoppable and who is not, that you do inside the country, because foreigners are human beings, just like you. So that's my position. It's an integration, that we have standards for. The government can't use force unless you are free to act. Now, certain things are forbidden to you, but the government can't do anything except what is permitted. This is a point Ayn Rand makes in The Nature of Government. The private citizen can do everything except what's forbidden. And what's forbidden is you can't beat people up, you can't rob them, you can't threaten them, you can't drag them off. That's basically that kind of thing. Then the standards that have developed are, when does the government declare a threat or have the right to even investigate if there is a threat? And those are known. Those exist. And just the cherry on the cake, and then I'll take another breath. ICE. ICE is founded on the principle the government can find out who's a bad guy just by looking at them. We don't have to go through no stinking epistemological procedures. We look at a guy, we listen to his accent, and we know he's got to be detained. We know that he's liable to be subject by us to physical force. We can stop him. We can take him away to a detention center. We can question him. We can do all kinds of things, including kill them, we find out. That's what happens when you unleash the idea of standards from the entire common law and constitutional law basis that it has so painfully been won by developing. So if people would think about it and separate the metaphysical question, which I think we all agree on, from the standards of evidence question, then I think it's pretty clear that there has to be a reason to interfere with the motion of somebody. A reason about him, not he comes from an area with a lot of crime. So do people in the slums. They come from an area with a lot of crime. Let's say race A has a higher crime rate than race B. Does race B then have the government stop members of race A randomly and say, produce your papers, prove to me you're not a threat? That's racism. And it's racism when it's done at the border. I don't mean racism in the sense of bigotry. You know, I just don't like these people. There's a hell of a lot of that in the common, the widespread xenophobia about immigration. But objectivists don't have that, I don't think. But it's racism in the sense that it's collectivism. You're saying, well, because 1 out of 10 people, and that is nowhere near that either, because 1 out of 10 Mexicans is involved in some kind of drug-related bad force-using thing, then we can investigate all of them en masse. That's collectivism. The fact that 1 out of 10 of your neighbors is a criminal doesn't mean you're under suspicion. People have free will. The fact that they come from a high crime area means nothing about what they are going to do. All right, so that's a very long answer to a brief question on your part.
I did look up some statistics shortly before the show, and I saw that Tijuana, right across the border from San Diego, I think a couple years ago, the murder rate per capita was, I think it was twice what it was in Memphis. So like in Memphis, maybe 1 out of 2,000 people were killed in a given year. And in Tijuana, 2 out of 1,000 people were killed in the same year. So
yeah, but you know, if you're going to play the statistics game, you've given up individualism. But I could play it. Let's play it. Okay. Let's give up individualism for the border towns. Just pretending. The border towns in the United States have a lower crime rate than the average for the United States. If you want to avoid crime, go to El Paso or San Diego. Go to even south. What is it, Bonita? Right near the border. The crime rate there, according to Cato Institute, is lower in all the border towns with the South, on the South, than it is in the country. But it's kind of shocking to hear that, but when you think about it, it makes sense, because people come to this country. Why do they come? To get welfare. No, they come for the American dream. So the better people come, the worse people stay behind. So it makes sense that there would be a big differential in the crime rate in our favor, so to speak, between Tijuana and Bonita.
Now, speaking of statistics, I guess in war, you mentioned at the outset that there's an exception for war. Is that just because statistically it's much more likely that there will be threats, like if we're at war with Iran, as we actually are right now, or
No.
Japan, Germany in World War II? There's a much higher statistical probability that, now it's not to say everyone from those countries
No.
is a terrorist or is going to be harmful, but
Yeah, would you keep out Jews from fleeing Nazi Germany? Roosevelt did, but is that right? Or Manzanar and the Japanese internment camps were based upon an irrational fear of native-born but Japanese ancestry individuals, and those things are not warranted. But if your country is possibly going to be invaded, it's not statistics. You have to intercept intelligence or have some reason to believe that there's going to be a problem. Now, if you're Israel, you've got plenty of reason to believe. You have knowledge, you have certainty. Every day you wake up to mortar attacks from the surrounding countries. So it's known that you have to enforce certain things at the border. But for the United States, is there really a problem of terrorists coming into the country? I don't think so. And it's certainly not of a order that it would be in a war if we were at war with Mexico. But, that's inconceivable because we're so strong. But anyway, yeah, in principle, if you're at war with your neighbor, you damn well better patrol your border. But that's an entirely different situation. And it requires a declaration of war. Let me say something about crime on another front. Can I do that, Dan?
Yeah.
The whole issue of crime has been elevated to this monster status as if there were a huge problem for everyone in the country or even everyone in the border states with crime from immigrants. There is not, and even if there were, it's nothing compared to the crime committed against you by your government. Every year, your government takes thousands and thousands of your dollars in taxes. Every time you buy and pay a sales tax, the government has robbed you. The threat to your rights is not that some Mexican or Bolivian gang member is going to come into your nice neighborhood and for no particular reason beat you up or take your things. The thing that governments dealing with crime should be handled by the police. And if it's a problem, which it isn't, crime has been going down for decades and decades. But if it were a problem, get more police and fix the court system. These people, the right tries to trumpet these cases of he came in illegally 4 times, he was deported three of them, and now he's back and he's committed 100 felonies and he's out on the street anyway. We got to stop him. No, he should be in jail. Why isn't he in jail? Not for being an illegal alien, but for his crimes. The reason is it's very hard to put someone in jail. Unreasonably hard. The court system is way too slow. The judges are way too lenient. The whole thing, criminal and civil, needs to be reformed. So if you're worried about crime, which you're silly to be worried about crime unless you're living on the edge of a very sketchy neighborhood, then do what we have for crime. Lobby for that to be beefed up. More police. And, when I say more police, let's quadruple the police. But real police, not ICE officers who have no accountability and are not part of our legal system. Real police with real training. And let's multiply. The courts are all clogged. quadruple the number of courts. It's not a big expense. Neither one of them is a big expense. Welfare is a big expense. Socialists, I decided to call it socialist medicine. It's not socialized medicine. Socialist medicine is a huge expense. Social security is a huge expense. And all the other rat holes that they pour your money into are a huge expense. Cops, not a federal expense at all. State cops, how much does that cost? So the answer to crime is police and courts, not let's close off the borders and seal 9 innocent people to live in bad conditions and have no future in order to stop a mugging by a 10th who has no causal connection to those others. It's like suddenly crime has become the new climate catastrophism. You know, we're all going to die from milder temperatures. We've got to change everything about what we do because the weather's going to get a little milder. It's the same kind of hysteria. Crime, what they're coming across. And I have one more thing. If you worry about crime, beef up the police and the courts. Build more prisons. The other thing, damn, it went out of my aged brain. We'll get back to the other point. I'd rather have you say something.
Okay. I'd like to, well, I guess before we go on war is what I wanted to get back to a little bit. I just want to clarify, are you calling for, like a lot of people in Objectivism and maybe outside of Objectivism would say, yeah, in a free world, in a laissez-faire society, I'm happy to have open borders, open immigration, let people come in and out. But in today's world, mixed economy and the threat of jihad, that's where we should have some restrictions.
We don't have any threat of jihad.
Okay.
We don't have any threat. You know, just in the last few days, there have been a couple of shootings. A guy drove a truck into a temple, a synagogue in Michigan. And that's out of 330 million. And you see it for a half an hour on TV, and they're terrible things. But they're the last gasp of people, they're naturalized citizen from Sierra Leone. Who committed that one. And the other one, I forget. But they do happen because they get a lot of publicity now. But it's not, keep a sense of proportion. They're not jihadists streaming in. And the answer to jihadism, if you think they are streaming in, the answer is regime change in Tehran. Don't pull back. Fight to win, as the Wall Street Journal put it. We have to have the end of those mullahs and a free or semi-free Iran. That way we don't have to worry about all the groups that Iran sponsors. And let's put some pressure on Putin. Let's put some pressure on Xi. We don't have to go to war with them, but we don't have to help them either. So a good foreign policy is the solution to such jihadists as we have in this country. Now, a harder question would be, what do you do if you're in Europe or in England and you see all these Muslims entering your country, which is not necessarily a good thing? What is the solution to that? Now, I have some ideas, but that's really a separate problem. We don't face that in the U.S., and I think it's handleable under an open immigration policy if, since you brought it up, don't give them any welfare and assimilate them. Don't allow them to go about swaddled up. I mean, they have a right to wear the thing that leaves their face free, but you don't have a right to go out in public with your face hidden. If you're going out in public, you give implicit consent to people to see who you are. Now, I'm not absolutely certain about what I just said, but I think it's true. But in the wider principle is the European countries, and I include England in that, are not doing what they need to do to have a melting pot. They are allowing these enclaves to have their own law in certain cases. For the, what is it called, the banlieue in Paris, surrounding Paris, the police won't go in. That's surrendering sovereignty. Remember, I said the border is where you enforce your law. That is, the government enforces its law. You can't have enclaves of some other law and still have sovereignty. So I think that they have a problem worth discussing, but we don't have a problem of jihadists and Muslims swamping into this country.
Well, I wonder if the concern is not that we have it today, but if we did open the borders, then they would come and take advantage of that. Now it's easier.
Why would they want to? Why would they want to?
Death to America,
Great
right?
Satan? Yeah, what? Do you want to go to Tehran? Do you want to go to North Korea? Why would they want to go to a country they call evil? Those people wouldn't want to go.
They did it on 9/11, right?
Those were all visitors who were allowed in through immigration. They passed through immigration.
Sorry, I'm just.
And that was only made possible by the long string of capitulations to crimes against Americans by Islamists overseas, starting with the seizure of the American embassy, for Christ's sake, for 444 days. That should have resulted in military action right then. Right then. Huge military. Those people should have been killed. The people who, the mullahs who arranged that capturing, they should have been killed. Now we're starting to kill some of them, and that's really a good thing. But you just can't you can't say, well, what policy ought we to have if we're not going to have the right policy? The right policy is capitalism and self-defense, which means not permitting foreign nations to kill Americans and then nothing happens. But we had that since 1979. So 2001 is what, 22 years? 22 years of repeated weakness, inviting them to do something like this. And what did we do when they did it? We bombed Afghanistan. We messed up a few training camps temporarily. And now the Taliban are back in Afghanistan. So a weak foreign policy is a corollary. The other weakness that creates an apparent problem is drug laws. You want to stop the Colombian cartels and the drug gangs? Legalize drugs, all of them. Freedom is the great solvent. If every drug were free to be sold, just the way you sell aspirin, a hit of heroin would be the cost of a pill of aspirin. There's a tendency for the rate of profit to be the same across the economy, and now it's a global economy, adjusted for risk. So if you put in a huge risk of selling something in the U.S., then you have to have a huge profit from the people who want it. They have to pay a huge profit. And that's where you get crime from. That's why gangsters in the U.S. came about during Prohibition. It was prohibition of alcohol that created organized crime in this country. And in the same way, it's the prohibition of drugs that creates the huge criminal problem of drug lords and drug gangs and drug dealers. In this country, we could get rid of it tomorrow, just legalize everything. And there's no reason to have it illegal. What's the reason? People don't even bother to give a reason. They will manufacture a few things. Wow, they'll be sold to children. No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't be, because there'd be no particular profit in it. There's no, if you were making a 5% return on selling heroin, why would you sell it to kids and risk, because that should be illegal. Kids cannot consent to, they're not old enough and rational enough to consent to taking drugs. But we are. I would never do it, but I want the right to do it. So if you got rid of drugs, so let's have a program. Drugs are legal. Got rid of drug laws, anti-drug laws. Drugs are legal. Police are increased. Courts are made to operate quickly, and we have more courts. And they don't get welfare if they come here. And by welfare, I mean no food stamps, no any of these alphabet agencies, I don't even know the name of them, that give them everything. No free medical care, except from private charity. There wouldn't be any immigration threat. People would come here because they wanted to work and make money, which is the kind of people that we want here, the kind of people we've always attracted. There's been our pride to attract. So that'll be the program. Legalize drugs, beef up the criminal justice system, and no loot, no government money. If you come here, you have to sign a piece of paper saying, I agree not to get any form of government aid for the next 15 years or forever. And my children won't either. You would have tremendous immigration of people who are not looking for a handout, that are looking for jobs. Capitalism works. Free market, to the extent we still have it, is a huge magnet because it creates wealth, and people like wealth. You know, they prefer to be rich than to be poor. And that's the best thing in them. So they don't come here for welfare. Now, they may come to some parts of Europe for welfare. They may switch country to country to welfare. I am not really familiar with that, and I'm not generalizing to that. But it's known that the average immigrant here, I remember the point I forgot before. The average immigrant here takes less in welfare and pays more in taxes per the amount he gets in welfare than the Native Americans. And now, at the point on crime, you watch Fox, you watch whatever other right-wing things there are. It's not, I guess I'm not with it to know what is on the internet that you'd be watching. And they spotlight, here's a guy. This is what we're talking about. This is why we need ICE. Here's a guy who just butchered a little girl. He tortured her, raped her, sliced her up, and sent the parts to the parents, whatever it is, you know. And he's been deported. He's an illegal alien, or he's a legal alien, but was deported, whatever. So they've got, you know, every night you see these cases. Where are the cases about the Native Americans doing the same thing? It's the fallacy of cherry picking. It's a biased sample. That for every immigrant you find who's the worst of the worst, you can find 10 Native Americans, maybe 100 Native Americans just as evil and who've been in prison just as many times and released on probation, should not have been released. You can find the parallel, exact parallels, but they only show the foreign ones. So that is totally slanted journalism. That was a thing I forgot and wanted to come back to. So, are you waiting with another question, or I can explain?
Yeah, thanks for that. I have one more, and then I think I'll go to some audience questions. So I just want to make sure I understand, but just to confirm. So today is March 13th, 2026. So on your view, you would open the border today if you had the power to do that. You wouldn't phase it in gradually over time.
I don't really know. I'd have to look at it to see what the story is. After so long a deprivation, when there's a backlog for everyone who gets in, there 10 who tried to get in and couldn't, didn't get the visa in the lottery, it might cause a dislocation to let them in. And also, if you were a foreigner been trying to get in and could not get in, and I'm elected president and I somehow, with congressional approval, do this, wouldn't you rush across the border because who knows what the next president is going to do? You wouldn't take your time at it. So it could be that if I thought about it carefully, I would want phased in additional immigrations. I'm not wedded to do it tomorrow. I'm just saying morally, the right thing, aside from practical difficulties, is not to have it. Now, how we get from here, what the practical difficulties are, to there, I haven't really made up my mind. And I don't think it's pressing, because I don't think there's any big movement to do that. So if they call on me and want me on the Supreme Court or something, then I'll sit down and work it out in an hour. But for right now, I'm not really taking a stand on that.
Okay. And then just to wrap up on the war point. So if there is a country like Israel who's at war with its neighbors, you think that it's reasonable for them to not have open borders?
Absolutely. It's mandatory they have closed borders. Yeah.
Okay, but I guess if you had some way, like if you had a database with individualized information on all the Palestinians or Arabs surrounding them so that you had specific information, then you could still let all those people in. It's only when you don't have specific information.
Yeah, but it's really, maybe I should make that point too. You don't really know. Sure, in extreme cases, here's a PhD from the University of Cairo who has authored a lot of papers against why the United States is the greatest country in the world and the others should live up to it and stop dumping on the U.S. And so here's the great guy. Okay, yeah, we can let him in. But in the real world, how do you know about, you have 30,000 people a day maybe coming across the border. How are you going to know who is going to violate rights and who isn't? I don't think it's practical. And there was another point that, this thing about, don't let in the criminals. I used to hold this. Yeah, we have a right to stop the criminals. And we have a right to vet to see who is a criminal. That is such a floating abstraction. It occurred to me only about 2 or 3 years ago. What do you mean a criminal? Well, someone who's, let's say in Mexico, is convicted of grand theft auto or whatever they call it. He stole a car. Has he been convicted? Yeah, he was convicted. What happened? He went to jail. Oh, so now he's an ex-con. He's out. He served his time and he's out. You can't keep him out if you're going to treat ex-cons who are native-born differently. We let ex-cons who are native-born Americans participate in life in almost every way. Sometimes they lose the right to vote, which I think is reasonable. And sometimes they can't buy firearms, which I think is reasonable. But you don't say, well, wait a minute, here's an ex-con, he's crossing the street. Let's ask him for his papers. How do we know he's not going to do it again? So the ex-cons are supposed to be treated as okay people now by the government inside the country, so as we say outside the country. So who have you got that are the criminals? Well, there are those who haven't been caught. All right, they're fugitives from justice. Maybe they broke out of prison. Or maybe the Mexican police are trying to get them because they're drug members and they shot up something and some people. And they're being chased. Yeah, if we know that guy is trying to come in, we can arrest him and hand him over to the Mexican police. But how many people is that? The impression is, and with ICE it's multiplied 1,000-fold, the impression is we know who the criminals are. All we have to do is like stop them and say, wait a minute, are you coming in here to commit crimes? Si, senor. I steal. It's ridiculous. The people who've been convicted are in prison. There are a few people who have not been caught or escaped from prison. Okay, those can be stopped if we know the Mexican police can send us a most wanted list or wanted list. And if a cop is at the border, he can look, but he can look inside the country too. You know, it's not like there's so many of these fugitives from justice who are the actual criminals who still bear the stain of criminality and that we would keep out. So it's a gigantic floating abstraction. Oh yeah, we're going to get the worst of the worst at the border or inside, and we're just going to know who those are. We don't have to have a trial or anything. We don't have to wait until he commits a crime. We can look in his eyes and see he's a criminal type, and we're going to send him out. To call it a floating abstraction is kind of too mild. It's mysticism with an evil intent. I could explain why I said evil intent, but I haven't gotten to my big point yet, Dan.
Oh, go for it now. Now's a good time for it.
Okay. I guess I said it just so rushed, but the one thing that supports the arguments for sealed borders or any kind of border controls is one premise that's wrong, that's behind all of it, and that's collectivism. The idea is Mexican, the Colombian, the Venezuelan. I have an image of him and I don't like him. He's ruthless. He's bad. Trump says they're rapists and murderers. It's a collectivist. And we get to, the worst collectivism is on ours. We get to say who comes into our country. We? Our country? You don't own any country, fella. You own your land, and you get to say who comes on your land. You don't get to say who comes on my land. It's our country in the sense of we live here and we're subject to its laws, and we have citizenship status. We don't own it. The people do not own collectively America. So that's why I began with, you can't go down to the border, hold up a gun and demand that people prove things to you about themselves or about anything. And our country doesn't have the right to collectively do that because it has no rights other than the individuals have and delegate to it. For instance, you have a right to stop someone from robbing you. In certain cases, you have the right to shoot him and kill him if he's trying to kill you. So the government, you can delegate that, and you must delegate that to the government. You say, well, the police will do this objectively. We can't have everybody deciding for himself who's trying to do him harm. We have to put that under objective control, and that's what government is for. But that is the right you have and can delegate, as opposed to the right you don't have, which is to stop people and make them prove to you that they're good. You don't have that right, and therefore the government doesn't have that right. So it's collectivism. It's the idea that the immigrants are one solid block, and the idea that we own our country. Sovereignty is not ownership. Citizenship is not ownership. You don't own my house. If I want to bring a Mexican in to live in my house, or if I have rental property and I want to rent to him, you have no right to stop me just because we live in this under the same legal system. So it's individualism is the answer. Collectivism is the disease. Okay, now.
All right, thank you for that. I do want to turn to super chat questions. We have about 10 minutes left. I was promised an hour. You're welcome to stay as long as you like, but we have.
Let's see what the questions are like.
Oh, okay.
Maybe they're good.
And I also want to say thanks everyone for being here. We have set a record on attendance. The highest I've ever had watching me before was 20 people live. Now I have 39 last I checked. So we've almost doubled the live viewership. So thanks to Harry for making that possible.
And a lot of recorded viewers.
Yes, I'll probably cut this out and make it its own video and publish that as its standalone so people can share that if you just want to share the interview. But I'll be live streaming some more after this interview. If people want to stick around for that, they're welcome. Okay, and also thank you for the people who have subscribed. I've got some new subscribers during the show. Thanks also for the likes and the shares. All right, I do want to go to some of the super chats. The first one is from Jason, who asks, Harry, should Italy have open borders with North African countries, even if it turns Italy majority Muslim?
I'm not prepared to say. I don't know. Turning a country majority Muslim per se is no problem. But please, when you repeat this and quote me, say per se. That is, if you went back, let's say 50 years ago, 70 years ago, before there was the Muslim Brotherhood and jihadism and all that, and a country turned from Christian to Muslim, that's not a problem. What's a problem is if people have an evil ideology, like Islamic jihadism, and they are coming into your country and you're not doing anything to make sure that they learn a proper ideology. So, in a rational world, or a rational half of the world, we're dealing with the other half, the immigrants to the better countries from the worse countries would learn a better philosophy. But all across Europe for 200 years, the philosophy has been in a sewer. So no one is saying to them, your religion stinks. Christian religion stinks too. All religions stink. And we should have shaken off the hold of religion at the time of the Renaissance, when we began doing that. And at the birth of America, it was a pretty secular country. But because of irrationalist philosophies that had spread since Immanuel Kant, and starting really with Rousseau and Hume before Kant, but Kant was the climax of it, people don't learn to give up their primitive, mystical, savage, superstitious beliefs and move into a civilized worldview. It's not that they all have to be objectivists and agree with Ayn Rand, but there shouldn't be large numbers of people still believing in a super ghost who created the universe out of nothing and is watching over you to make sure you obey what was written in a book 2,000 years ago. And both Christianity and Islam and believe that, and there are even worse religions in the Far East. So bad philosophy creates a lot of problems. People don't know how to be reasonable, rational, civilized, respect rights. They don't even know there is such a thing as individual rights. So I have a hard time answering, not knowing about Italy and North Africa much enough to say. And when I say that the real solution is a philosophic revolution that would eliminate this problem.
Okay, thank you. The next super chat is from Steven, who says, I was hoping to ask Dr. Binswanger to explain his comparison of immigrants to people who wear shoes. I don't know what that's a reference to.
I'm trying to think. I said I brought wearing shoes in an entirely different context. But since I just talked about religion, maybe I'll just take a little detour. It's entertaining. My first exposure to Objectivism and Ayn Rand came in 1962 when I was at MIT as an undergraduate in my freshman year, and I went to hear a lecture she gave entitled Two Young Scientists. And one of the things that happened was in the question period, there were a number of life-changing events or sections of it for me, but one of them was the very first question that she got: are you an atheist? And at that time, I wasn't exactly an atheist. I would have described myself maybe as believing partially in some kind of impersonal force in the universe that is what people really mean, like the force that makes everything go to equilibrium. So, but not a person. I didn't think there was a personal God, but maybe, who could say, maybe there's something in that direction. And she was, are you an atheist? And she said, of course. And I heard in my mind, of course. And I likened the tone with which she responded, of course, was as if somebody had asked her, do you wear shoes when you go out in the street? She said, of course. And it was as natural and as obvious to her as that. And I thought, yeah, once you frame it as a factual question, not what if, well, maybe, who knows, but do you really think there's something up there in the sky that's a super spirit? No, I don't. So that makes me an atheist. And that's the position that I held today. But that was so clarifying. She went on to say, I accept reason and only reason. And there's no reason to believe. But it was just the way she said, of course, was so clarifying to me because it put it in a scientific, natural context rather than the what if realm. So that's all I know about immigrants and wearing shoes.
Yeah, maybe he can expand on the chat if he wants to
Yeah.
Clarify what that means. Okay, I have two other super chats. One is not on the topic of immigration. One is. Do you have a preference on?
Well, let's start with the immigration one and then do the non.
So this is also from Jason, who asked one earlier. He says, Harry, Israel is at peace with Indonesia. Should Israel have open borders with Indonesia?
Indonesia is a Muslim country, and I would be hesitant, because what it would mean is people who hold the ideology that you have to be destroyed now would be coming in droves. I would think the answer is no. But if there were, you can't be at peace. It's like saying in World War II, we were at peace with Germany after Pearl Harbor until Roosevelt declared war the next day. We weren't really at peace with Germany. It was obvious that Germany was allied with Japan and was going to be part of what they then called the Axis powers. So if Israel were at peace in general, should they allow in Muslims? Yes. But it'd be real peace. Now, you may not know, Jason, how many Palestinian Arabs who practice religion, I suppose. But all I know is the numbers for how many Arabs, I think the Palestinians, live in Israel, which has a population of about 8 million now. How many, well, for context, how many Jews live in Gaza before the war? Or Iran, Iraq? How many, actually I don't know about Iran, but this around Syria, Lebanon, how many, Jordan, how many Jews live there? 0. Because if they did, they would be murdered. How many Palestinians already live in Israel, a country of 8 million? 2 million. Israel gives rights to all the people who come there, not just the people with the Jewish religion, not just people who pass some ideological litmus test. So that just adds to the incredible distortion created by the left about Israel as some kind of what they call colonial, but colonialism is good, not in their book, but in my book. Some kind of evil regime. No Jews in the surrounding countries because they wouldn't live long. 2 million out of 8 million in Israel. And then I was told, I spoke at University of Houston, I think it was. Anyway, I was in Houston, and I was told by 2 people, this was about 10, 15 years ago, who said they were objectivists, that Israel doesn't allow the non-Jews, and particularly the Palestinians, to have rights in, can't own land, they can't vote, which is completely false. There are like 30 Arabs in the Knesset, which is the Israeli Congress. There are Arabs on the Supreme Court. There are Arabs in the military. They have full participation in the Israeli society. And some of them are fighting for Israel in this war. So the mythology that's spread about what's going on is just incredible. So the original question is, Israel was at peace with Indonesia. Should they allow? I don't think so. The risks are too high. When you're at war, that's when the normal rules are suspended. You can have what is that called, where the military imposes a curfew and everything, which you can never have in peacetime. So their lives are at stake. They can't take risks with it. So I don't think so. I'm not going to dogmatize. I don't know much about Italy and North Africa. I don't know how much jihadism there is in Indonesia. But I'd be dubious that they should let them in. The mere fact that you're at peace with a country, you're not at war with country, isn't really the same thing as peace. For instance, Americans should be able to get into Israel, and Israelis should be able to get into America. We're allies. But that doesn't mean just because Indonesia is not lobbing missiles in that they are at peace with Israel when Israel is at war. So I think it'd be foolhardy, but I'm not certain about this. Foreign affairs are not my specialty. My specialty is the moral case and what is in non-emergency situations the thing to do. And I'm America-centric. So I can say that we're not in an emergency here. And I would love for people to be admitted without welfare and for drugs to be legal. And that would take care of, you wouldn't really need the extra prisons if drugs were illegal. Did I say illegal? If drugs were legal. It's paradoxical, but every time there's a big arrest and they seize X kilos of heroin at the border, that means the price of heroin is going up. That means that more crime will be committed in America by addicts who are desperate to get heroin and will do anything to get it. So it's actually creating American deaths, and certainly American crime against Americans of lesser than death, every time they take heroin out of circulation. It's called supply and demand.
Okay.
So the last question?
Yeah, actually, one other question came in while you were giving your last answer, so I don't hold you to sticking around for that if you don't want. But I'm going to read the first one, the one prior to that, which is the one that was off topic, and it says, this is from Audrey. She asks, how does Rand/Peikoff solve the problem of induction?
Well, she didn't. She said she didn't. She also said she was going to. That's not quite right. She solved the problem of universals and wrote Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology to present her solution. That dealt with the theory of concept formation. The next step would be propositions. And presumably the theory of propositions would solve the problem of induction, which is the other great unsolved problem. And she said she was going to write that. But she died before she undertook the project. When she wrote what we refer to as ITOE, Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology, it appeared in 1966. And she was 61. And she talked about doing a volume 2, but she died when she was 76, if I'm doing the math. She died in 1982 and had not begun it. So Leonard Peikoff did it. And the solution involves two things. the nature of concepts, and the hierarchy of knowledge. The thing that I tried to solve it, I couldn't do it, and the mistake that everybody was making, except Dr. Peikoff, was to start looking at cases high up on the hierarchy, like water boils at 212 degrees. That would be like trying to have a theory of concepts when you start, as the example that you want to use, with voltage or justice or tariff. She started with table. That was her example of how you form a concept. She used table. She actually used length before that because it's just one attribute. But Dr. Peikoff started with the base of the hierarchy of causal identifications. Things like pushing a ball makes it roll. Rain wets the ground. Drinking slakes thirst. Things that are first level causal identifications. And he observed that I'm just giving you a quick intro to his intro. He observed that in forming a concept, you generalize. Picked up on a lead that Ayn Rand gave in her work, Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology. So when you have the concept table or the concept rain or one of these simple first level or close to first level concepts, implicit in it is that you will apply that to any instance. So if you observe it raining and you can have the concept rain and the concept ground and the concept wet, you're prepared to say rain wets the ground. And that is a general statement. So inherent in concepts being general is a generalization to the first propositions, which are self-evident. You can't be mistaken about rain wets the ground or pushing a ball makes it roll. And he takes up apparent counterexamples and handles them very well.
Due to technical difficulties, a few minutes of audio was lost or garbled at this point. That section has been edited out of this video, but it can be found in the original live stream, which is linked in the description. The following section of the interview picks up in the middle of Dr. Binswanger's answer to the next question from the audience.
Okay, I just want to say one more thing and then I'll leave. There is a country, there are two hopeful countries in the world. One of them, to my amazement, is India. India, the intellectuals of India and the people have discovered Ayn Rand, and there's a lot of respect for her in India. I don't think they've translated it all into what it means in practice and what they should do, but I get Google alerts on Ayn Rand, and the things that come, the mentions that come from India are almost always positive, which is astonishing. The other hopeful country on a lesser level is Argentina. Javier Milei, who aims, his stated goal, and he's an admirer of Ayn Rand, but also of libertarians, which is not a good thing. But his stated goal is to make Argentina the freest country in the world. And he has done a lot of really good things towards that end in a very short time. So there are signs of progress. It may not be America. America may be too far gone in the educational realm. The American youngsters can't think. But I hope it'd be America. But I remain optimistic about the future. So with that optimism, I will thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk and call it a day.
Okay, you're welcome, and I really appreciate you coming on. 2 super chats came in just in the last minutes, but I won't hold you to answering those.
Could you read them to me? Because I'm a sucker for questions.
Okay, and I asked the chat how many minutes were garbled or lost, and someone said probably about 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that started at the end of your induction answer. Probably after that, I would guess. Mm-hmm. But I started recording from Zoom, and I will try to stitch in later to the next version of this as much as I can to save as much as possible of the non-garbled portion. Okay, so the 2 that just came in, there was one from another one from Jason on immigration, which says, Harry, do you support open immigration of Muslims into the USA?
Yes.
And then the other one was from Simon, who asks, before Harry leaves, will he be releasing his book he mentioned on the philosophy of mathematics?
It's grown. I'm now writing a book called 5 Sciences, which is on mathematics, physics, biology, psychology, and economics. Did I name all 5 there? I think so. So in a way, it's a retreat. In a way, it's a tour de force. I don't want to get into higher mathematics. I'm going to stop at calculus. And I really know nothing beyond calculus. And I only know a few words beyond calculus, but I worked with calculus, and I think I've got the application of my basic philosophy of math to calculus. But it's going to start with 1 and 1 is 2, or even before that. So it's mainly about the whole conception of mathematics. And I have similar radical ideas in these 4 other branches. And I thought, why don't I do a book on all 5 sciences? That way I don't have to get really deeply into any of them. I can treat them all on the foundational level and the first steps beyond that. And that's where my law of comparative advantage, that's where my comparative advantage is, at the very beginning, very base of all these sciences. Once it gets more detailed, I'm left behind and I have less to contribute. So I'm going to do a book called 5 Sciences, and I'm already lining up ChatGPT to take everything I've written on mathematics and create a draft from it, which I will then correct it on. And with many of the other fields, I may be able to do something similar, or I may start from scratch. But I really have a lot to say about particularly economics, foundational, and psychology. Biology, I had that one idea that is now available in a beautiful new edition. Oh, it's going to be a reverse. It's the biological basis of teleological concepts. And physics, I've written a lot, so I can probably use my posts and have ChatGPT summarize it. So I'm looking at this change, which I think will make it really easy for me and make it come out fast. So I hesitate to give a timeline, but I'm thinking of about a year from now.
All right. Great.
So those were the two extra. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
a good way
actually, I don't. Again, you can leave it any time, but one more came in, and there's also some questions that are not super chat questions, just no dollar amount attached. So,
All right. I'll tell you what. I'm going to practice giving short answers. So this will be not fully satisfying, but it will be practice for me at not being so discursive.
Okay, and actually, while you just said that, another one came in, and that's a new person. So that is a super chat. So I'm going to read that one first. This is from Michael. He asks, Harry, what makes you think there will be a civil war? Who will be the combatants? Antifa versus MAGA?
What versus MAGA?
Antifa.
Oh, Antifa. No, it will be the whole left. Antifa is just one little segment. What makes me think, I don't know, but I can't see Trump accepting a loss at the midterms. I think that's what ICE is for, to, quote, guard the polls. And to be his SS, if you know what the Nazi SS was, the stormtroopers, the Sturmabteilung. No, that was the SA. Schutzstaffel, I think, was SS. So you saw what he did at the end of the 2000 election, that he egged on January 6th. He spread the lies about the election was stolen and fomented a riot, and he claimed he would be in power after January 20th. And he had hoped that there would be, in effect, an uprising. So now, in the midterms, he's going, as things stand now, he's going to lose the House and probably the Senate, which means he will no longer be king. He will no longer be able to dictate everything and people just kneel and kiss his ring. He'll still be, somewhat powerful, but he will have lost a really big amount of power. And I don't think he's going to just sit still for that. So I think he will go against the law, and it will tear the country apart. And the MAGA people like guns. So I can see at least skirmishes, if not full-fledged civil war. I will say, this is not a short answer, by the way. I will say that in 1968, I thought there'd be civil war by 76. So my track record of predictions here is not good. Let us say this is my fear. My fear is that something like January 6th, but 100 times bigger and spread across the country, is launched to keep Trump's power going. Next one.
All right, this just came in 3 seconds ago from Bobby. He asks, what practical steps can an objectivist take to improve their rhetorical skills? Any resources besides Peikoff's great objective communication series, of course?
Yeah, there are a lot of things. Join Toastmasters. That'll improve your speaking skills. Argue with people. And then after the argument, think about how you could have done it better. There are training courses. My wife just took one, but they can be expensive. Tens of thousands of dollars. But that's a start. And I found, I argued with people my whole life, and it always nagged at me, how could I have put that better? I mean, that wasn't really the right thing to say. I'll give you one more fun tip. Look at Ayn Rand's answers to questions, but first look at the questions, and they're available in many formats, including Ayn Rand Answers, a book, and the Objectively Speaking, which is largely questions. And get the question and think of how you would answer it, and then compare yours to Ayn Rand's. And I'm not saying that hers will always be better, but they'll be better 90% of the time. And that's a fun way to improve your rhetorical speaking skills.
Okay. One from a bit earlier, again from Jason, in the identical question, but he asked $10 more, maybe because he wanted to hear more. So he says, Harry, do you support open immigration of Muslims into the USA? Before, you just said yes, but if you want to say anything more, you can add to that.
Well, if you have also every other religion atheist coming in, it's not like we're going to only have Muslims coming in. And if they're the kind of Muslim who wants to be in America, they're fine. We had a lot in New York. I'm from New York originally for 49 years, and there came to be a lot. They're nice people. So it's the jihadists that are the problem, but a strong foreign policy, there will be no jihadists. Certainly not coming to this country. And I can't give Trump credit for anything, because whatever he does for reasons that are no good. But it was the right action for somebody to take to bomb Iran. And the big question is, why did it take, what is it, from 79 to now, 21 plus 25, 46 years for somebody to do something like this? All the other presidents should have done something, and more than this. I hope this is not going to fizzle. We need military dominance over our enemies. And then there won't be any problem with jihadists and sleeper cells and anything like that. Also, it discredits, I said I'd be short, so military superiority, crushing military superiority like we have over Iran, discredits spiritually Islamism. It shows that God is not on their side. It at least makes them question, well, how could God permit this? I thought we were strong. Or I thought they were strong, because most Iranians are not Islamists. I don't know if you know that, but it's a new fact. But over the past few years, Iran has become a secular country in its populace, but it's run as a theocracy. So I'm looking for regime change that allows the secular, non-religious, non-America hating, good people of Iran, who are always pro-West, historically, to take over. Next one.
Okay, this is from Virtue Man. He asks, are open borders morally compatible with welfare statism? Shouldn't the welfare state be dismantled before?
No, but it's no, but it's a good excuse to do it. So it's good selling, good salesmanship to pair freer immigration and more property rights. So you move 2 steps to freedom. You take less you undermine welfare, the whole welfare system, and you get in more immigrants who are obviously not coming here for welfare. So that fig leaf, that red herring is removed. They're not coming anyway, but that would take that away. So no, morally, you don't have to. You could even make a case if native-born parasites are allowed to do it, why shouldn't foreign parasites be allowed to do it? But I would pair as many steps to freedom as I could with each individual step. And it works both ways. Let's cut back welfare, and that will, and for Americans, let's cut back welfare across the board and allow in more immigrants. And we'll know that they're not coming for welfare. But, you know, morally, no, you can't keep people out because some of them might go on welfare. That's ridiculous. That's collective guilt.
Okay, I have one from someone who goes by the name Hookem3768. Harry, can you tell your joke about Monsieur Pascal standing at the gates of hell? These are not super chats, by the way.
Gates of heaven. Gates of heaven. He meets St. Peter. Now, the context for this is Pascal, Jourdain Pascal, a thinker a little bit after Descartes, who is famous for saying the heart has its reasons that reason does not know. He was an irrationalist and a mystic, and he came up with the Pascal's wager argument for God. And the way it goes is you have two choices: to believe, or I guess you'd have to say to act as if you believe, but he wasn't that honest, to accept the existence of a God or not. Now let's look at the odds. If there is a God and you accept the existence of God, you get into heaven, which is infinite bliss. If there is a God and you don't accept him, you go to hell, which is infinitely bad, infinite suffering. If there isn't a God and believe that there is, whether there's a cost involved, it's minor, but it's certainly not infinite. And if there isn't a God and you don't believe in God, there's no infinite consequence either. So the only basis for deciding, he said, is believe. So if there is a God, you'll get an infinite reward and avoid an infinite punishment. So that's called Pascal's wager. He said, as a betting man, would you take a bet where if you do one thing, you get an infinite punishment? If you do the other thing, you get an infinite reward. But if there isn't a God, you have a finite plus or minus, pretty negligible. And my cartoon shows a man dressed up in that French, not the Teddy's, but a big hat with the plume, and is obviously a Frenchman from the 1700s. And he's standing before St. Peter at the pearly gates, who's got a list of, who's admitted to heaven and who's not. And on a little bit to the side, there are two demons waiting to grab people and bring them down to hell. And St. Peter is saying, I'm sorry, Monsieur Pascal, you lose. And the demons are ready to grab him. The point that makes is there's no calculation of the irrational. If you're since belief in God is totally without reason, and he admits that. He says the only reason is this bet. There's no argument that there is a God and that he wants you to do this or that. So if you're allowing in the irrational, what about the possibility that if you pretend to believe or believe in God and live your whole life according to what the Bible says, God sentences you to infinite pain? He sends you to hell forever. There's no reason to think that it's going to be one. If there is a God, if you admit the irrational, you can't say, well, the rational thing for him to do is to want you to believe, and more than that, it says in the Bible. That's no reason. You have no idea what that irrational, non-comprehensible being would do to you. Maybe it's like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. We're here to protect the ants. I think that was Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He could want you to make sure that you always write your twos upside down. So don't write it like this. Write it like this. I can't do it upside down. There we go. It's irrational. There's no reason. So how can you say what's going to happen from the irrational? I was thinking the other day that I could actually get AI to draw that cartoon for me. Next one, or is that it?
No, one came in just a couple minutes ago from Bobby. He asks, my friend often attempts to deceive others by pretending to be 3 different people. Any advice for him? What would Rand's position be? Is this compatible with objectivism?
No, this is not. You mean like split personalities were supposed to be, where he sometimes pretends to be John Doe, sometimes pretends to be Phil Jenkins, and sometimes pretends to be Arthur Johnson? Yeah, well, he's not here to answer, but to deceive others to gain values is a prime vice. It's faking reality. It's victimizing other people. It's not a whole lot different than just seizing things, robbing them of things. You're getting some value from them by deception, not by consent. So it's definitely self-destructive, and beyond that, it's silly. Is that an ending note?
I think it is. Let me just double check.
I'm looking, when you see me looking up here, that's where I see Dan above in the Zoom displays. That's why I sometimes look up there.
Okay, and my eyes are sometimes going to the chat, so I'm going back and forth between the chat and Zoom. But it looks like that was the last question, so I think we're done.
Good. Well, it's been fun.
Yes.
And it's rare that people can get me to say I don't know 3 times in a question period. But
well, I think some of the questions were the same, so same cause, same effect.
Very good.
All right.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, thank you very much, Harry. I appreciate it.
Bye to everyone.